The courtroom fell into stunned silence. The judge's gavel struck with such force that the sound echoed through the room, rattling the water pitchers on the bench. A hushed gasp rippled through the gallery as the witness, trembling, spoke a truth so shocking, so raw, that it froze the air in the room. The court stenographer's pen stopped mid-word, the ink splattering as the truth spilled out. A juror gripped the armrest so tightly his knuckles turned white. In the back, a coffee cup fell from a reporter's hand, dark liquid spreading across the floor. The tension in the room was palpable, every eye fixed on the witness stand, every ear straining to catch the next word. And then from the back, the scandal-chasing reporter, Ryan Peterson, leaned forward in his seat. His eyes gleamed with excitement, the promise of a career-making story already forming in his mind. This was the moment. This was the scoop that would make his name. Ryan Peterson had built his career on chasing scandals. He thrived on the excitement of the story, the rush of uncovering the truth, no matter the cost. But this case, this trial, was different. He could feel it in his gut, a tight knot that refused to loosen. This wasn't just another piece for the morning paper. This was personal. As the story unfolded, he realized that the players involved weren't just strangers. They were people who had shaped his career, his reputation. There was a connection here that went beyond the headlines. He had always been the one chasing the story, but now he found himself caught in it. The deeper he dug, the more he realized just how far-reaching the implications of the trial were, not just for the accused, but for him, for his own future. Ryan Peterson's phone buzzed incessantly, each call and message another reminder of the storm that was brewing around him. The courtroom drama had become public spectacle. Every media outlet, every social media account, was scrambling for their piece of the story. The deeper Ryan dug, the more he uncovered, but with every answer came new questions. The headline was too good to pass up. A star witness turns on the defendant. A scandal so deep, it could topple a dynasty. The story was unfolding in front of his eyes, and Ryan could almost hear the sweet sound of his career skyrocketing. But something wasn't right. The prosecutor's tactics had become more aggressive, and Ryan had started to see cracks in the people he had once trusted. The witnesses, the defense, even the press, everyone had their own agenda. And in the midst of it all, Ryan felt like he was being used as a pawn in a game far bigger than just a simple scandal. In the back of his mind, he wondered, was he chasing the truth, or was the truth chasing him? Ryan's investigation hit a new low when he discovered the shocking truth. As he sifted through a stack of documents, his hands froze on a particular file. A photograph. A letter. It was a message that had been hidden for years, and it had the potential to destroy everything. An affair between the witness and the defendant, a secret relationship no one could have suspected. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. The implications were staggering. This was the kind of story that could ruin careers, and the very people involved had been careful to bury the truth. For a moment, Ryan debated the next steps. Could he use this? Should he? But then again, in his line of work, the truth was the truth. No matter who it hurt. He had crossed the line before. What was one more step? He had to expose this. Not just for the story, but for himself. By the time the trial reached its peak, Ryan had made up his mind. The photograph, the letter, everything he had uncovered, he couldn't keep it to himself. He had to run the story, no matter the fallout. The entire case had taken a personal turn, and Ryan knew that once the story hit the press, there would be no going back. He stood outside the courthouse, his heart pounding in his chest. The crowd had gathered, and the air was thick with anticipation. The pressure was unbearable. He had pushed his career, his reputation, and his integrity to the limit for this story. In that moment, Ryan knew the price of success. It wasn't just a career-defining move. It was a chance to destroy lives. And as the gavel struck once more in the courtroom, Ryan took a deep breath and made the call. The story would go live, and everything would change. The story broke. Headlines blazed with the explosive revelation. affair between key witness and defendant shakes trial to its core. Ryan's phone blew up with calls, messages, and emails. His editor congratulated him, but Ryan's heart wasn't in it. The moment the story went live, the room seemed to shrink around him, the weight of his decision pressing down on his chest. He had known the story would be huge, but he hadn't anticipated the personal toll it would take. The phone calls from angry colleagues, the emails from anonymous sources threatening his career, it all came rushing in. But it wasn't just the external chaos. It was the internal struggle. The trial's defendant, once a prominent figure in the public eye, was now facing the full force of the law and public opinion. Ryan had single-handedly set the stage for their fall from grace. His own reflection in the mirror seemed to mock him. Was this really the truth? Or had he crossed the line? The next morning, Ryan's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from his estranged father. "What have you done, Ryan?" The message hit harder than any of the vitriol he'd received from the media or public. His father had always been the one to remind him of his morals, his ethical compass. And now, here he was, asking if Ryan had lost that too. Ryan stared at the message for what felt like an eternity, the weight of his past and present crashing down on him. The phone call with his editor had been brief but pointed. "The story's out, Ryan. No turning back now. Just make sure your next piece doesn't blow up in your face." As he stared at the text, his thoughts went back to the victim, the defendant's spouse, whose life had just been exposed and torn apart. Was it worth it? Was any story worth this destruction? Ryan's phone rang again, but this time it wasn't a call he could ignore. The voice on the other end was low, measured, and dripping with venom. "You think you're the only one with a story to tell, Peterson?" The threat was clear. Ryan's pulse quickened. This wasn't just about public opinion anymore. It was about the forces that controlled the narrative. A shadowy figure from the depths of the legal world had made it clear. If Ryan didn't back off, things would get ugly. His instincts screamed to hang up, to cut ties and run. But he couldn't. Not now. Not when the story was unraveling in such a big way. And then there was the call from the defense attorney, the one who had made it clear he'd go to any length to destroy Ryan's credibility. Ryan didn't know who to trust anymore. The pressure was suffocating. Ryan had made it to the courthouse again, but this time, it felt different. The weight of the defendant's fall, the scandal, and the personal toll it had taken on him. He wasn't sure how much more he could handle. His colleagues had started to pull away, distancing themselves from the chaos Ryan had unleashed. But worse still was the growing distance between him and his own morals. The line between right and wrong had blurred. Was he really chasing the truth, or had he become part of the story too? As Ryan stood in front of the courthouse doors, the very place that had once symbolized his career's rise, he wondered, was the truth worth losing everything for? In the quiet of his apartment, Ryan stared at his reflection in the mirror. It was late, and the world outside was silent. But inside his mind raced. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of chaos, deception, and moral compromise. He had crossed every line, burned every bridge. Ryan's gaze shifted from his reflection to his phone. The texts, the calls, the threats, they all blurred together. But then something clicked. He couldn't be the person he had become. The scandal, the story, it was no longer just about fame or recognition. It was about redemption. With a heavy heart, Ryan made the decision. He would make things right. The story wasn't over, but the path to reclaiming his integrity had just begun. Ryan had become the story. The press coverage, the scrutiny, the constant barrage of phone calls, it was overwhelming. The defendant's lawyers were digging into his past, accusing him of bias and sensationalism. His editor, once a strong supporter, had begun questioning his methods. Every door he knocked on for a new lead seemed to close tighter. But it wasn't just the professional consequences. It was the personal ones that were eating him alive. His friends had begun to distance themselves, his relationships were fraying, and most painfully of all, his family refused to speak to him. The truth had been exposed, but it had come at the cost of his own soul. Still, the story wasn't over. The scandal he had uncovered was just the tip of the iceberg. and Ryan couldn't walk away now. There was something bigger behind the scenes, something buried deep in the case that he had yet to uncover. But every clue he followed seemed to drag him further into a world of deceit. Ryan met the fixer in a small, dimly lit cafe, the kind of place where people talked in whispers. It was clear from the moment they shook hands that this wasn't an ordinary conversation. The fixer, a man named Elias, age 40s, male, had a reputation for knowing everything and everyone in town. If anyone could help Ryan unravel the web of corruption he was tangled in, it was him. "I know what you're after," Elias said, his voice low and steady. "But be careful, Ryan. Some stories aren't meant to be uncovered. Some people would do anything to keep their secrets buried." Ryan's jaw tightened. He had heard the warnings before, but this time it felt different. Elias wasn't just advising caution, he was hinting at something far more dangerous. "Tell me what you know," Ryan demanded. Elias smirked, leaning back in his chair. "I can help you, but you'll have to decide just how far you're willing to go to get the truth." As Ryan left the cafe, the words Elias had said replayed in his mind. He was already in too deep, but now, with the new information from the fixer, the stakes were higher than ever. Every lead he followed seemed to lead him down a darker path. The trial was nearing its conclusion, and the final pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. Ryan had discovered a connection between the defense attorney and a prominent political figure, one that could shake the foundations of the entire trial. But getting this information out could destroy everything he had worked for. He couldn't stop now. But the closer he got to the truth, the more he realized the price he would have to pay. If he exposed this, he would not just bring down the guilty parties, he'd bring down everyone involved, including himself. Ryan received a call late one night. It was from Claire, the one person who had always supported him. Her voice trembled on the other end of the line. "Ryan, you need to stop. I can't be a part of this anymore. What you're doing, it's dangerous. People are going to get hurt." Ryan's stomach sank. He had known that Claire didn't fully agree with his methods, but hearing her so upset felt like a gut punch. "I'm just doing my job," Ryan replied, though the words felt hollow. "I'm chasing the truth. You are chasing a story, Ryan, and you're about to destroy everything for it." The line went silent as Ryan stood there, stunned by her words. Could she be right? Was he too far gone to turn back? The pressure was unbearable. Ryan had reached the breaking point. The trial was almost over, and the truth he had fought so hard to uncover was slipping through his fingers. The defense had already started to pull their tricks, undermining the evidence he had gathered. The more he pushed for the truth, the more he realized that no one wanted it. Not the defense. Not the media. And certainly not the public. All they wanted was the next scandal, the next piece of gossip. Ryan stood in front of his computer, staring at the final draft of his article. He had everything he needed, but could he really publish it? Could he live with the consequences? His career, his integrity, his relationships, they were all on the line. With a deep breath, Ryan hit send. Ryan sat in the back of the newsroom, staring at the computer screen where his story had gone viral. It had done exactly what he wanted, sparked a firestorm of media coverage. But now, as the initial rush of adrenaline faded, he was left with the bitter taste of regret. The reactions were swift and furious. The defendant's family issued a statement. The defense lawyers were calling for an investigation into Ryan's methods, and the public was split. Some hailed him as a hero, while others labeled him a villain, a reckless reporter who had ruined lives for the sake of a story. Ryan's phone buzzed. Another message from Claire. "I warned you. People are already talking about the fallout. This isn't going to end the way you think." The weight of her words crushed him. Was she right? Had he gone too far? The story had broken open a scandal, but now everything he'd built, his reputation, his career, was teetering on the edge of collapse. Ryan's personal life had already been in shambles, but now it was falling apart completely. His phone rang incessantly, but it was never with good news. Calls from angry sources, threats from the defense team, and worst of all, messages from his family, who had now distanced themselves entirely. His mother's voice on the voicemail broke through the noise. "Ryan, I don't know who you are anymore. Please just come home." That was the last straw. He had ignored their warnings for so long, consumed by his need to break the biggest story of his career. Now, as the fallout took its toll, he realized that the story might cost him everything: his family, his friends, his integrity. Ryan had trusted Elias, the fixer. He had used the man's information to fuel his story, but now he was learning just how much Elias had played him. The shady connections, the hidden motives, the underhanded dealings. It was all coming back to haunt him. Elias had offered him a story, but at what cost? Ryan had been so eager to expose the truth, he hadn't realized he was also being manipulated. Elias had fed him just enough to keep him digging, but never enough to reveal the full picture. Now, as Ryan sifted through his own notes, he realized the story Elias had set him on might have been more about his own power than the truth. Then, the phone rang again. Ryan answered, bracing himself for the inevitable confrontation. "You've got a problem, Ryan." Elias's voice came through. "You've stirred the pot. Now you need to clean it up. You're in too deep. There's no going back now." Ryan's investigation had led him to the truth, but it also led him straight into a trap. He met with a source he thought he could trust, but as they spoke, the source revealed something unexpected. A well-placed anonymous tip had been feeding him false information the entire time, and the evidence he had gathered was far from reliable. The final blow came when he found out that the story he had uncovered, one that had cost so much, had been orchestrated, manipulated from the start, by the very people he was trying to expose. The scandal wasn't just a media circus, it was a setup. He had been used, and now, everything he thought he knew was called into question. The trial was over. The verdict had been read, and the dust had settled. But Ryan knew that the consequences were just beginning. His article had set off a chain of events that could no longer be undone. The people involved, the ones he had exposed, were coming after him with everything they had. He had one last chance to fix things. A phone call from Claire earlier in the day had reminded him that he still had time to make things right. But was it even possible? Could he repair the damage he had caused, or was it too late? Ryan stood at the edge of a decision. Continue digging into the story, expose the deeper corruption, and risk losing everything, or back down, admit his mistakes, and try to salvage whatever was left of his career and his integrity. The morning after Ryan's story had dropped, the world seemed to shift under his feet. Social media exploded, and every outlet from tabloids to major news networks was covering the scandal. The headlines screamed his name, some in admiration, others in condemnation. But Ryan could barely focus on the applause or the vitriol. He was consumed by the backlash from those who had once trusted him. Colleagues had turned their backs. His editor gave him one last chance to make things right. Fix this or you're done. The guilt and shame hit harder than any attack on his credibility. His inbox was flooded with messages, some offering support, but most filled with threats and accusations. His reputation, already in tatters, was crumbling faster than he could rebuild it. But as he sat at his desk, staring at the blank screen in front of him, Ryan realized the damage was beyond repair. The truth was too powerful to ignore, but the personal cost was too great to bear alone. Ryan hadn't heard from Claire in days. When her call came, he wasn't sure what to expect. "Ryan!" Claire's voice crackled through the phone, filled with concern. "I know what you're going through, but you can still make this right. You need to come clean. The truth isn't about the scandal, it's about who's pulling the strings behind the scenes." Ryan's heart raced. He had been so focused on the scandal itself that he had lost sight of the bigger picture. What had started as an investigation into a single case had expanded into a much larger conspiracy. Claire had been right all along. "You were just doing your job," Claire continued, "but now it's time to uncover the people who have been using you. If you want to fix this, start by exposing the puppet masters." Ryan dove back into the investigation. But this time, he wasn't chasing the story, he was hunting the truth behind the story. The deeper he dug, the more he realized that this wasn't just about the scandal. It was about the people who had orchestrated it from the shadows, the powerful figures who had used the media and the justice system to further their own agendas. The defense attorney, the political figure, the fixers. Ryan was starting to see a pattern. Each piece of the puzzle led him closer to a person whose influence stretched far beyond what Ryan had initially suspected. But every step forward only led to more danger. He was being watched. Every move he made, every lead he chased, put him at greater risk. Ryan's breakthrough came late one night when he uncovered an email thread between the defense attorney and a high-ranking government official. The message was clear. The scandal had been manufactured to cover up something far more sinister. The trial wasn't just about the defendant, it was a smokescreen for a far-reaching corruption scheme that involved money laundering, illegal arms deals, and political influence. The more Ryan read, the more the room seemed to close in on him. His heart pounded in his chest as he realized the implications of what he had just uncovered. This was no longer a story. It was a war, and Ryan had unknowingly stepped into the middle of it. Ryan was at a crossroads. The story he had uncovered was bigger than anything he had ever imagined, but it came at a price. Exposing it meant taking down the powerful figures behind the scandal, people who would stop at nothing to protect themselves. He thought of his family, his friends, and Claire, who had been there from the start. What would they think of him now? Was it worth it? Was it worth putting his life and the lives of those he loved in danger to expose the truth? Ryan stood at the edge, the weight of his decision bearing down on him. There was no turning back now. He had already crossed a line. The only question left was whether he would continue down this dangerous path, or walk away and let the corrupt system continue. Ryan sat in the dim glow of his office, the city lights flickering outside his window. He had all the pieces now, the documents, the emails, the hidden connections that tied the corrupt figures together. His fingers hovered above the keyboard, ready to expose it all. But fear gnawed at him. Every word he typed could bring down a scandal that would destroy careers, lives, and reputations. He could already feel the weight of the consequences, the lives that would be torn apart by the truth. Claire had warned him, and so had his father. "You're playing with fire, Ryan. Some truths are too dangerous to expose." But as he stared at the screen, Ryan couldn't back down. He had come too far. The story had consumed him. The truth was bigger than his fear. Just as Ryan was about to hit send, his phone rang. It was Elias, the fixer, the one person who had been feeding him information throughout the investigation. "Ryan," Elias's voice crackled through the line, "you've gone too far. There's no going back now. If you release this, is not just your career you'll be ruining, it's your life. You think they won't come after you?" Ryan felt his blood run cold. The implication was clear. Elias was warning him, but also threatening him. The power behind the corruption was vast. Ryan had underestimated how far these people would go to protect themselves. "If you want to save yourself, you'll stop this now," Elias continued. "Walk away and we'll forget this ever happened." Ryan's mind raced. Could he really turn back now? Could he live with the knowledge that he let these people go free? Ryan's grip tightened on the phone, the weight of Elias's words sinking in. He could feel the fear rising in his chest, but something inside him snapped. He wasn't going to back down. The truth needed to be heard, no matter the consequences. "I'm not walking away, Elias," Ryan said, his voice firm, though it trembled beneath the surface. "I'm going to expose everything. If you think you can scare me into silence, you're wrong." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and Ryan could hear Elias take a slow breath before speaking again, his voice colder than before. "Then you'll regret this, Ryan. I promise you that." Ryan ended the call, his heart pounding. The decision had been made. There was no turning back. He had chosen the truth, but the price was steep. As Ryan prepared to release the story, he received an unexpected visit. It was from the defendant's wife, the one person whose life he had shattered with his investigation. She had been silent throughout the entire trial, but now she was standing in front of him, her eyes filled with a mix of pain and something else, understanding. "You don't know what you've done, Ryan," she said quietly, sitting across from him. "But I do." I know what it feels like to lose everything for a lie. And I know what it's like to be forced into a corner." Ryan was taken aback. He had expected anger, but what he saw was a broken woman who understood the price of exposing the truth. "I'm not here to stop you," she continued, her voice soft. "I'm here to tell you the full story, the one no one has heard yet." The woman's story was a revelation, a hidden truth about the corruption at the heart of the trial, the power plays, the betrayals that went deeper than Ryan had ever imagined. The information she shared changed everything. Ryan felt his stomach churn as he listened to her speak. He had always believed he was chasing the story, but now he realized he had been chasing a lie. The truth he had been fighting for was far more complicated, far darker than he could have ever imagined. When the conversation ended, Ryan stood in the middle of the room, the weight of the revelation heavy on his shoulders. He was no longer just a reporter. He was a part of the story. The final piece of the puzzle was in place, but now Ryan had to decide what to do with it. The truth would be exposed, but at what cost? Ryan stood in front of his computer, staring at the story he was about to release. The final draft was in front of him. Everything was ready. The truth was out there, but this time it wasn't just about the scandal. It was about the power structures he was about to tear down. As he hovered over the publish button, his phone buzzed. He looked down, recognizing the number. It was his father, calling again. He hadn't spoken to him in weeks. Hesitating, Ryan answered. "Ryan, don't do it," his father's voice came through, pleading. "You've uncovered things you don't fully understand. This story, it's going to ruin everything. It's not just about you anymore. Think about the people you love." Ryan's jaw clenched. He had heard it all before, but this time the stakes were different. "I've thought about it," Ryan replied, his voice hard. "This is bigger than me, Dad. It's about exposing the truth." But in his heart, Ryan felt the weight of his father's words. Was he doing the right thing? The story could ruin lives, but if he didn't tell it, who would? Ryan pressed the button. The story was live. Almost immediately, the world seemed to shift. The phone calls, the messages, the accusations, they flooded in. Newsrooms across the country were picking up the story, and social media was buzzing with fury and disbelief. But it wasn't just the reaction from the public that shook Ryan to his core. It was the backlash from the people who had once supported him. His editor called him into the office, his voice cold. "You've gone too far, Ryan. The ramifications of this are beyond what we can control." Ryan sat in silence, the weight of the moment pressing on him. He had known the risks, but now, as the storm began to swirl, he realized just how much he had lost. His career, his relationships, and his reputation were now in jeopardy. Ryan had been avoiding Claire, but after the story broke, he couldn't hide anymore. He met her in a quiet bar, the place they used to go when they needed to talk. She sat across from him, her expression unreadable. "You did it, didn't you?" Claire said, her voice soft but with an edge. "You exposed the truth, and now everything's falling apart." Ryan nodded, his stomach tight. "I had no choice. The story needed to be told." Claire leaned forward, her eyes searching his. "I get it. But Ryan, did you ever stop to think about the people you're affecting, the ones who never asked for this?" He hadn't. He had been so consumed by the story that he hadn't seen the damage it was causing. The trial, the witnesses, the families, he had torn through them all without a second thought. "I thought I was chasing the truth," Ryan said, his voice hollow. "But maybe I was chasing something else, something that's cost me everything." Ryan spent the next few days in a haze. The media storm had hit its peak, but the quiet devastation was far worse. He had lost his job, his relationships were hanging by a thread, and his name was now synonymous with scandal. The breaking point came when he saw the defendant on the news, their family devastated, their life irrevocably altered. He had played a part in that, and the weight of the responsibility crushed him. Ryan went to the courthouse, standing outside, looking up at the building that had once represented justice, now a symbol of his own downfall. He had done what he thought was right, but the consequences had become too much for him to handle. Was it worth it? The truth had been exposed, but at what cost? Ryan sat alone in his apartment, the walls closing in on him. The story, the trial, the fallout, it was all too much. But as the silence of the room filled him, he realized something. He could either walk away from this, live with the consequences, or he could continue to fight for the truth, no matter the cost. In that moment, Ryan knew that his journey wasn't about the story. It wasn't about the headlines. It was about finding redemption. He had been consumed by the chase for truth, but now he had to confront his own truth. Ryan stood up, walked over to his desk, and began writing once more. This time, it wasn't about exposing someone else's lies. It was about confronting his own.